I was going to say I may be presenting without a slide pack, and that's okay. I could talk underwater. But I might start my own timer just in case. Although I must say I'm thinking about food waste now. It's really on my mind. So, fraud. In the last 12 months, I didn't set out to investigate facilities for fraud. I set out to do what I do, to analyse operational improvements at the front end of waste facilities, landfills, transfer stations. And part of that was through general operational analysis. It was through an assessment of how gatehouses were transacting and interacting with their clients, and also recording the information and data. It was through a consideration of what's happening with cash handling, which sort of led to that fraud space. But fraud was certainly not the intent. So over the last 12 months, it's actually about 13 and a half months, I have analysed 163 facilities. Now they span across commercial facilities, local government authorities, small transfer stations, large landfills, an array of different sized organisations. But there was one commonality, and the commonality across those 163 facilities was that 94.4% of all organisations had evidence of fraud, either current or very recent historical fraud. So almost 100%. Now if you consider that we have, I think, I service about 400 facilities across the country at the moment, so it's almost half of the clients that I potentially have an opportunity to deal with. 163 with 94% hit rate. Of the actual facility number, not the organisations, 97.4% had evidence of fraud. Now that fraud comes in a number of different forms. Someone said to me today, fraud, yeah, cash handling, cash is a problem. Absolutely, cash is a problem. So this is, I suppose, a representation of the types of fraud that were the most common. So over 50% had multiple indicators. They may have had some obvious cash handling issues, duplicate dockets being printed, evidence of a beer economy. You know, old mate turns up at your transfer station and says, yeah, but if I give you a carton of beer, I don't have to pay that $800 for asbestos, do I? There were 24% of facilities that had obvious cash handling issues that were fraudulent in nature, not just a lack of being able to count. There were a series of inventory challenges. We have very expensive products. Sometimes they sit on the ground. They have a back-end revenue stream available to them. And then there's also the option of transporting challenges, contract negotiation risk, free disposal. There were, however, 4 facilities that had no evidence of fraud. 4 out of 163 says to me that I just didn't find it. I'm confident. The one thing that's clear in the waste industry is that we are slightly unique. In the manufacturing industry, people, when they focus on fraud, they focus on theft. You know, you steal an item of inventory. When we focus on the transport industry, we would think about, supplier agreements or recipient-created tax invoices, keeping in mind I'm an accountant, so I'll sometimes drop accountant lingo. And if we're looking at retail stores or, shop fronts, we're really then talking about pricing, discounting and cash. In waste, we very much cover all 3 of those industry types. We're representative of those same risks. So really we have 3 times the risk factor. So relevant to waste, that means that inventory is our scrap metal. It's our batteries. It's the HDPE piping that you might actually have a resale out of another part of the country for. It's alternate revenue streams. Scrap metal is absolutely the most common. I don't know a single facility that hasn't had a challenge at some point with one of their operators thinking, oh, I'll just take that copper, I'll take it down the road. It might have been 20 years ago before they had some better governance processes in place, but it's a risk factor in our industry. Inventory items in our industry that have a resale are often easy to transport. You can pick them up and put them in the back of your ute. They also come in the form of resale shops. We all have tip shops. Stuff's easy to pick up. Now, fraud doesn't necessarily mean that it's relevant to your staff. It might be that you have a customer that comes in with the intent of stealing something. The transport industry. When we talk about transport industry and it's relevant to waste, clearly contractors manage our fleets, our curbside trucks. We have customers who are often in the transport space. They might be earth-moving contractors or dirt jockeys. They may actually be skipping companies. We have supply agreements that can be quite complex in nature with really complex pricing initiatives that are relevant to where and how vehicles move. In addition to that, we have all of these different revenue streams with different calculation methodologies. The complexity of the nature of transport within the waste industry sometimes gets overlooked and it leads to fraud risk. And the final industry group that I suppose is reflective within waste is retail. Our landfills, our transfer stations have cash registers. I would love to say that we're all cashless. We're not. There's two people at the back winking at each other. Clearly they would like to be cashless. Let's talk later. Cashless is an ideal solution, but it's also not a reality. We deal with domestic customers, and if you're in a rural or a regional area and they don't have access to other payment methods or an ageing demographic, you can't expect them to be tapping and using their Apple Watch as they go. We also have these really easy solutions that we can solve for, but we get so busy with everything else that $20 that was missing from the till last month, someone in banking reconciled it 3 weeks later. And a month later when it happened was the other person in banking that reconciled it, so they haven't picked up on it. We've just forgotten to put controls in place. And then, as I mentioned, there's the beer carton economy. Does anybody know what I mean when I say that? Yeah. It's less common in the CBDs and the cities, but I'm still seeing it. I saw an incident 5-6 weeks ago in regional Queensland. Somebody has driven out to site with a load of asbestos, $800. Oh, so I've just been to the bottle shop. Scratch. So how much does it cost us? I would love to say that I have a number for you. Really love to. The challenge is that I don't. I recently visited a facility where their cash handling risk was $7.30. They had a tin of cash in their gatehouse, and when I asked, is your cash ever out at the end of day, they said, nah, never. I'm like, okay, how long have you worked here? 4 years. Like, okay, so in 4 years it's never been wrong, like 20 cents under. No. You got a little teacup or something? Yeah, and they showed me the teacup with the $7.60 in it. And that's where they put their unders and their overs every day. And then they buy a lottery ticket out of the end of every month. And they're a local government authority. That's fraud. They can be small amounts. They can be the operator who is printing duplicate dockets. I've got a $20 docket. I'll print out 4 more. I'll put them under the till. And then when someone comes in with $20, I'll hand them one of these dockets. I'm failing to record a transaction. By the same token, the challenge is not always a person that we employ. As I said, often that's not the case. They can be a $28,000 challenge that I found recently, and it's probably the most common type of challenge I find, where you have a revenue stream that is outside the scope of your normal transactional capture. I have no idea what my time is because my timer just stopped. So in relation to scrap metal, if I have scrap metal sales and I'm selling it to my local scrap metal dealer, they might send me a recipient created tax invoice at the end of the month. They will put a price on it. They will send it to me. They'll take some deductions off. They may know that I'm never going to check it. And depending on the reputation of my scrap metal dealer, there may be a challenge there. It is not uncommon for me to find anywhere between $15,000 and $30,000 over a course of a 12-month analysis. It takes an hour and a half to look for it. I've just found 20 grand in an hour and a half. Is there anybody here that wouldn't spend an hour and a half looking for $20,000 under the couch? Finally, there are the larger chunks of change. There are the $150,000, I forgot to build something into my contract because somebody gave me a nice little rebate. Unfortunately, I've seen one of those. There is the largest, which I found this year, which was $400,000. $400,000 per year over a course of 3 years. So really, it's not $400,000, it's $1.2 million. So when I say that fraud has a 97% hit rate across our facilities, that could be $20. It could be the little old lady that's letting her husband in and out of the tip shop and hiding things in a handbag. It could be the operator that lets his brother in for a discount. It could be the contractor relationship that's not quite what you expect. And unfortunately, I can't give you a dollar value of all of those combined. I'd love to, maybe for next year. So, how the hell do I lose $400,000? Let's talk about the scenario, shall we? How long have I got? 10 minutes? Awesome, I told you I'd talk fast. So I recently visited a local government group of facilities. They have multiple facilities. The challenge that this area has is they are small, they are regional, they have limited contractors available, and they don't have their own fleet. So they use contract curbside collection. The contractor is the only company in the region that they can use. The contractor is also the only company in the region that can operate their waste facilities if they don't do it themselves. So all of a sudden I have a bit of a conflict of interest. I've got a curbside contractor doing all the runs, and I've got a curbside contractor recording those runs in at the facility and determining what the revenue is, more to the point, what their cost is. Okay, so that's my first risk, no worries. Then I have a small team of 3 who are the waste team. And they're very conscientious and they're very hardworking, and they service a very large population in a very large, broad-ranging geographical area. So they are strapped for time. They get out to site once a year, they perform a volumetric survey once a year. Add to that, they have a naming convention that's a bit weird. I won't use the names because they're going through a negotiation actually with their contractor at the moment to resolve the challenge. But they call the product something that's really unique to their area, to their region. And some of the staff that work at the facility aren't local. It's just a weird word that they use when their putrescent waste comes in. They call it something different. The team is at arm's length from operations. The contractor is the same contractor for ops as for curbside. They are not checking their stockpiles, and they have a strange naming convention. So the challenge that's come up over the course of 3 years, at some point, 3 years ago, somebody made a conscious decision to record the product coming in those curbside trucks as something else, at $40 less per tonne. Over the course of 12 months, all of those loads accounted to approximately $400,000 worth of revenue that council has now not received, and I've taken 8.5 minutes to identify it. How many of you have validated your contractor relationships lately because you trust them? Has anybody taken the time to reassess those contractors that you have a great relationship, who you know are doing the right thing because they service you and they have great customer service? Now, what's happening now is that they're still the only contractor in the region to operate the facility. They're still the only curbside contractor in the region. So I don't have any logos or names to share with you because they're now going through a process of mediation and negotiation. But there was an intent to defraud a local government of $1.2 million over 3 years, and it easily slipped through the cracks because of those 5 key areas. So if you take away anything today, in relation to small fraud, please put some cash handling policies in place. If your staff tell you, or if your banking staff people tell you that your cash is never wrong, there's something going on, look for the unders and overs cup. Look for the cash kitty at your gatehouse. And check for duplicate dockets. Regardless of how you transact, what system you use, everybody generally has a way to tell you whether a docket's been reprinted. Check how many times your dockets have been reprinted. If it's 1,300, there's something going on. Somebody's printing dockets for a reason other than to just give a copy with an EFTPOS receipt. Secondly, for the big ones, check your extra revenue streams. If you have additional revenue streams that are going out that don't go through your transactional system, whether it's an additional invoice that someone in finance sends out or it's a back-end recipient created tax invoice, make sure you have a reconciliation process. It's the easiest place to find money. And finally, if you do not have an arm's length relationship with your contractor, or if there is an opportunity there that maybe the contract's been in place for a long time and no one's reassessed it, get somebody that doesn't deal with it every day to come in, someone from another team, get them to assess it for you and have a look to make sure that there's nothing just slightly out of the ordinary. What tipped me off was the fact that I looked at a pile of waste that had this strange name, and I looked at the stockpile next to it that had the same strange name that was empty and said, isn't that truck supposed to tip over there? Oh yeah, but that's this other waste. No, it's not. It's putrescent. It should be charged at the higher price. Oh no, but that's not what we do. 8.5 minutes, $1.2 million. Take 8.5 minutes this week, maybe next week, maybe not this week. It's Thursday afternoon. It's been a really long conference, an awesome conference, but a really long conference. 8.5 minutes next week. Just take some time, go and assess, look at something you don't usually look at with fresh eyes. I guarantee you'll find some fraud because, as I said, 97.4% of 163 facilities had current or historical fraud. That's it for me. I'm going to let everybody have an early mark so we can hopefully all go home. Feel free to come and have a chat later. Does anybody have any questions?